I sprinted into the emergency room with my 5-year-old daughter strapped in her car seat, her tiny chest heaving with every breath. She was wheezing, coughing, and panicked eyes darted around the hospital lobby as if she could sense something was wrong beyond just her body. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I screamed her name, Lily. Lily, breathe. Mom's here. But the panic only made her struggle more. People turned, startled, as I barreled past them. I didn't notice. I didn't care. I only knew one thing: my daughter needed help. Now. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. The nurse at the front desk glanced at us, then back at her computer. She scanned Lily's wristband, her face going pale, like she had just seen a ghost. I waited, out of breath, trying to explain that I was her mom, that I had brought her in because she couldn't breathe. The words barely left my lips before she whispered something I'll never forget. "Who told you to come here?" I froze. My daughter's eyes were wide with fear, and all I could think was, what is happening? How could my name, my very existence, be questioned when I am standing here holding the child I gave life to? I told her again, voice shaking, I'm her mom. She didn't respond. She just turned the screen away and picked up the phone. That's when the doctor walked in. Dr. Howard. He didn't introduce himself the way doctors usually do. He didn't say hello. He looked at the screen and said my full name, slowly, deliberately, like he was reading the name of a stranger who didn't belong. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a mistake or a busy hospital system. Something about my identity had been flagged, blocked, banned. From my own daughter's file. Why would the hospital treat me like an intruder? Why would my daughter's medical record refuse to acknowledge her mother? And most importantly, what could possibly be so serious that every adult in this ER seemed to know something I didn't? I gripped Lily's hand, my mind racing, my chest tight with panic, and that's when the nurse looked at me again, this time with an urgency that went beyond protocol. Something terrible, something I couldn't yet understand, was about to be revealed. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. I thought running into the ER would be enough. I thought showing up with my daughter gasping for air would make everything simple. I was wrong. Everything went sideways the moment Nurse Thompson's eyes landed on Lily's wristband. She froze, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as if touching it would trigger an alarm. My chest tightened. My daughter coughed again, tiny little spasms shaking her body, and all I could do was whisper, "It's okay, baby, mom's here." But her eyes looked at me like she was scared not just of the wheezing, but of the room, of the people, of the invisible wall that seemed to separate us from the help we desperately needed. Nurse Thompson stepped back, her face pale, voice trembling just enough to make it feel unreal. "Who told you to come here?" she asked again. I blinked. Who told me? I'm her mother. The words burned on my lips, but I felt my voice falter. My name, my identity, suddenly felt like it didn't exist in this place. The receptionist was busy with another patient. The waiting room blurred around me. All I could focus on was Lily's shallow, panicked breathing. Then she turned the screen away from me and picked up the phone. I tried to peek at the display, tried to understand what she was saying, but it was all murmurs, codes, and hushed tones. Her urgency made my stomach knot. Something was very wrong. And it wasn't just a hospital protocol. This was personal. I felt it. I asked her, voice rising, "Why are you looking at me like that?" "I'm her mother. I gave birth to her." She didn't answer, but her hands moved faster over the phone, and she shot me a look that made me feel smaller, like a stranger had walked into someone else's life. And then Dr. Howard arrived. He didn't greet us. He didn't smile. He just looked at the screen, paused, and said my full name. Slowly. Like a verdict. Melissa Carter. My stomach dropped. Every instinct in my body screamed at me. This was no ordinary hospital error. Something in the system, something official, had singled me out. And the more I stared at the doctor, the more I realized the people who were supposed to protect my daughter were treating me like an intruder. I clutched Lily's hand, holding on for both of us, and whispered under my breath, "What is going on?" But before I could get an answer, Dr. Howard leaned in and, in a quiet, almost conspiratorial tone, said, "You need to know why. But first, we have to stabilize her." And that's when I realized this was bigger than fear. Bigger than bureaucracy. Bigger than me. Whatever was hidden in Lily's file, it was going to change everything, and I had no idea how deep it went. I thought the hardest part was getting into the ER. I thought once we were inside, once Lily was in a bed with monitors and oxygen, I'd finally be able to breathe. I was wrong. The moment Dr. Howard leaned over Lily, glancing at the chart, and whispered, "You need to know why. But first, we have to stabilize her." I realized this wasn't just about a hospital error. Something had been buried, something dangerous, something deliberate. I tried to piece it together. What could possibly make a hospital treat me like I didn't exist? I remembered the custody battle with David, Lily's father. I remembered lawyers, court documents, restraining orders. But none of them had ever mentioned blocking a mother from her child's medical care. Could it be a legal loophole? A forgotten file? A technical glitch? But the fear in Nurse Thompson's eyes told me it wasn't simple. There was a human element here. Someone had made a decision. Someone had decided that I shouldn't be allowed near my own daughter. I watched Dr. Howard bark quick orders at the nurses, his eyes darting between the monitors and me. He stabilized Lily with calm, precise movements, but I could feel his unease. He knew I was being blocked. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened and his fingers tapped the clipboard. And then, between quick breaths of my own panic, I remembered something shocking, an old restraining order David had filed years ago, the one I thought had expired. Could it still be active in some digital corner of the hospital system? Could it have labeled me a danger in ways I never imagined? I felt a cold dread creep through me as Nurse Thompson returned, whispering again, "You shouldn't be here. It's complicated, dangerous." Dangerous? I stared at her. My daughter is struggling to breathe and this is dangerous? My voice shook with disbelief. How could the system, a place built to protect, turn into a trap? As I tried to explain, Lily's tiny hand gripped mine, her trembling fingers wrapped around my thumb, and it struck me, she knew something was wrong too. She didn't understand why her own mother was being treated like an intruder, but she could feel it. And in that moment, my fear doubled. My child's life depended not just on medical care, but on uncovering why her own mother's name had been erased from her existence. Dr. Howard leaned down and spoke to me quietly, his voice low but firm. "Melissa, there's more to this than just a system error. You need to understand what's happened, but first, she has to be stable. If we lose her now..." His words hung in the air. And as I looked at Lily, struggling yet alive under the bright hospital lights, I realized the truth was coming, and it wasn't going to be easy to face. Someone had intentionally blocked me from my child. Someone had decided I didn't belong in her life. And what I was about to discover would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family, my past, and my own daughter's safety. But before I could even begin to process it, the phone rang again, and Nurse Thompson's face went white. Whatever was coming next, it was bigger than me, bigger than Lily, and there was no turning back. The phone kept ringing, but this time, I didn't care. My world had narrowed down to the tiny, fragile chest of my 5-year-old daughter lying on the hospital bed. Every wheeze, every cough, made my heart hammer like it would burst. Dr. Howard motioned me closer, his eyes serious, and finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "Melissa, you need to understand why the hospital flagged you. It's not an accident. It's in the system." I swallowed hard. Flagged me? Why? What does that even mean? He took a deep breath, glancing at Lily before he looked back at me. "Years ago, your ex filed a restraining order. It wasn't just for custody. It included a medical restriction that, legally, limited your access to Lily's records and even to her care without explicit verification." My stomach dropped. What? That restraining order? I thought it expired. Dr. Howard shook his head slowly. It should have. But somewhere in the system, it wasn't removed. The hospital software treats it as active. So when you walked in today, it triggered an alert. Your name was technically banned. Not by the staff personally, but by the law in the database. I felt dizzy, like someone had punched me in the chest. So, all this time, my own daughter, the one I've been raising every day, I was treated like a stranger. My voice broke. The thought made me want to scream, cry, and shake someone all at once. Dr. Howard's hand hovered over Lily's monitor, adjusting her oxygen. It's not just technical. It's dangerous. If you hadn't arrived when you did, it could have been worse. Relief collided with rage. I looked down at Lily, who was starting to calm with each slow breath, and realized just how close we had come to disaster. Every hospital protocol, every blocked access, every whispered warning, it had all been layered over a simple administrative error, but the consequences had been terrifyingly real. I wanted to scream at David, at the system, at anyone who allowed this to happen. But the only thing I could do right now was hold Lily's hand, feel her pulse, watch her stabilize. And as the fear started to ebb, a thought hit me. How many other parents are trapped in the same invisible prison, blocked from their own children by errors, outdated orders, or bureaucracy? The nurse, still pale, gave me a small, almost apologetic nod. Dr. Howard smiled faintly. You're here now. That's what matters. I looked down at Lily, my baby, my heart, her tiny fingers curling around mine, and I realized something. Sometimes the people and systems meant to protect can become the very obstacles we fight against. But even in the darkest moment, love finds a way through bureaucracy, fear, and error. As I pulled Lily close, brushing her damp hair from her forehead, I couldn't shake the thought. We'd survive today, but the shadow of that ban would haunt me forever. And I knew deep down that uncovering who allowed it and why wasn't over. Someone had deliberately let this happen. And someday I would find out who. I held Lily in my arms, feeling the steady rise and fall of her chest, and for the first time in what felt like hours, I allowed myself to breathe. The panic, the fear, the absolute terror that had gripped me the moment we entered the ER, it didn't vanish, but it softened. I looked around at Nurse Thompson, at Dr. Howard, and even the bustling ER that had moments ago seemed like a maze of shadows and secrets, and I realized something profound. I had fought through a system that had nearly treated me like a stranger in my own child's life, and I had survived. But survival didn't erase the questions that burned in my mind. How had an outdated restraining order managed to stay active for years without anyone noticing? How many other parents had been flagged, blocked, or silenced by bureaucracy, by technical glitches, by people who had the power to intervene but chose not to? And most haunting of all, what would have happened if I hadn't acted quickly enough, if I hadn't trusted my instincts, if Lily hadn't been my daughter, but someone else's child in a similar situation? As I stared down at her tiny hands clutching mine, I thought about the fragility of trust. Hospitals, courts, and laws are supposed to protect. Yet here I was, the mother, treated as an intruder, almost prevented from saving my child's life. The contradiction was staggering. And it made me question the very systems we rely on without thinking, how easily something meant to safeguard can become a weapon, how a single unchecked order or error can ripple into chaos. Lily blinked up at me, her eyes wide but calming, and I realized the truth of it. Love doesn't wait for clearance forms. Parenthood doesn't stop at bureaucracy. Even when a system fails, the bond between a parent and child persists. And in that moment, I made a vow. Not just for myself, but for every parent who might face this nightmare, that I would never let fear or intimidation stand between me and my daughter. If you take anything away from this story, let it be this. Trust your instincts, fight for your voice, and never let someone else define your connection to your child. Systems fail, people falter, mistakes happen, but your love is irreplaceable, your presence undeniable, and your courage essential. I looked at Lily again, brushing her hair from her face, and whispered, "We made it, but we'll never forget this." If you've ever faced a moment where someone or something tried to block you from what mattered most, share your story below. And remember, sometimes the most terrifying battles aren't with strangers, but with the systems we thought we could trust.